It starts in the silence. You're sitting in a room where nothing bad is happening. The light is soft, the air is still, someone nearby is smiling, and yet every muscle in your body is tense. You're scanning, always scanning, the tone of their voice, the way they shift in their chair, the micropause before they laugh. You're reading between lines that haven't even been written yet, because somewhere deep inside, your nervous system learned a lesson it never forgot. Calm is just the space before the storm. This is hypervigilance. And if you've lived with it long enough, you know it doesn't feel like anxiety. It feels like survival. It feels like intelligence. It feels like the only way to stay safe in a world that taught you that peace was always temporary. But here's what most people don't understand. Hypervigilance isn't weakness. It's adaptation. Your brain made you this way to protect you. The problem is, what once saved you is now exhausting you. And today we're going deep into the psychology of why you can never fully relax, why calm rooms feel dangerous, why you're always waiting for something to go wrong, even when nothing is. Because until you understand what's happening inside you, you'll keep mistaking your survival instinct for who you are. The invisible threat, let me ask you something. When you walk into a room, what do you notice first? Most people notice the furniture, the lighting, maybe who's there. But you notice exits. You notice tone. You notice who's too quiet and who's talking too loud. You're not being paranoid, you're being prepared. Because at some point in your life, probably early, your brain learned that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in silence. Sometimes it waits behind a smile. Sometimes the scariest moments came right after someone said, "Everything's fine." So your nervous system adapted. It built an early warning system. And now, even years later, even in rooms where you're completely safe, that system is still running in the background. Psychologists call this hypervigilance. It's a state of heightened awareness where your brain constantly scans for threats, even when there aren't any. It's not a choice, it's a reflex. And here's what's fascinating. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was trained to do. The problem is it's operating on outdated information. Think of it like a smoke alarm that goes off every time you make toast. The alarm isn't faulty. It's just too sensitive. It's responding to a threat that doesn't exist anymore. That's what hypervigilance does. It treats every moment like a potential crisis, every conversation like a negotiation, every silence like a warning, and the exhausting part, you can't turn it off. You want to relax. You tell yourself there's nothing to worry about, but your body doesn't listen. Your shoulders stay tight. Your jaw stays clenched. Your mind keeps running through scenarios that haven't happened yet. Because hypervigilance lives in your nervous system, not your conscious mind. And you can't talk your body out of a threat response it's been practicing for years. To where it begins. For most people, hypervigilance doesn't start in adulthood. It starts in childhood, in environments where unpredictability was the norm. Maybe you grew up in a house where you had to read the room before you entered, where you learned to listen for footsteps, to sense mood shifts, to know when it was safe to speak and when silence was survival. Maybe your caregivers were inconsistent, loving one moment, cold the next. You never knew which version you'd get, so you learned to watch, to anticipate, to stay one step ahead of their emotions so you could manage your own. Or maybe there was chaos, yelling, fighting, instability, and in that chaos the only control you had was awareness. If you could see it coming, maybe you could brace for it. Maybe you could make yourself small enough to avoid it. That's how hypervigilance gets wired into the brain, not through one traumatic event, but through repeated exposure to unpredictability. Neuroscientists have studied this. They've found that children who grow up in high-stress environments develop what's called an overactive amygdala. That's the part of the brain responsible for detecting danger. In a healthy environment, the amygdala activates when there's a real threat, then calms down once the threat is gone. But in unpredictable environments, the amygdala never fully calms. It stays on high alert, because the next threat could come at any moment, and over time that heightened state becomes your baseline. So even when you're an adult, even when you're in safe spaces, your brain is still operating like it's in that childhood home, still scanning, still preparing, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. You might not even remember all the moments that shaped this response. Some of them were too small to seem significant at the time, but your nervous system remembers. It catalogued every unpredictable reaction, every sudden mood shift, every moment when safety turned to danger without warning. And now, decades later, you're still living by those rules, even though the danger is gone. Even though you're no longer that child who had to protect themselves, your body hasn't gotten the message yet. Yes, the cost of constant vigilance. Here's the thing about hypervigilance. It doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects how you live. You can't fully relax, ever. Even in moments that should feel peaceful, your mind is running simulations. What if they're upset? What if I said the wrong thing? What if this changes? You're exhausted, but you can't rest, because resting feels dangerous. Like letting your guard down, like giving the world permission to hurt you. So you stay alert, you stay ready, and you tell yourself it's just who you are, that you're cautious, careful, responsible. But deep down you know it's not caution, it's survival mode that never turned off, and the cost of that is real. Psychologically, chronic hypervigilance leads to burnout. Your nervous system isn't designed to run at high speed constantly. When it does, you experience what's called nervous system dysregulation. That means your body stays in a state of fight or flight, even when there's nothing to fight or flee from. You might notice it in your body, tightness in your chest, shallow breathing, jaw clenching, trouble sleeping. Even when you're lying in bed, your mind won't stop, because your brain thinks rest is a risk. Emotionally, it shows up as irritability, emotional numbness, or feeling like you're always on edge. You snap at small things, you withdraw from people, you second-guess every interaction. Socially, hypervigilance makes connection difficult, because when you're always scanning for threats, intimacy feels dangerous. You can't fully open up because vulnerability requires letting your guard down, and letting your guard down feels like inviting pain. So you keep people at arm's length, you stay surface level. You show them the version of you that's safe, controlled, unthreatening. But the version of you that's real, that version stays hidden. Because the real you is the one who's scared, the one who's tired, the one who just wants to stop scanning for danger and finally breathe. And here's what's heartbreaking. You're doing all of this to protect yourself, but the very mechanism that's supposed to keep you safe is actually keeping you isolated, lonely, disconnected from the very thing you need most, which is genuine human connection. Because true connection requires trust, and trust requires letting go of control. And letting go of control is the one thing your hypervigilant brain will never let you do. Now, why calm feels dangerous? There's a strange paradox to hypervigilance. The very thing you crave, peace, safety, calm, feels like the most dangerous thing in the world. Because in your experience, calm was always the before, the moment right before everything fell apart. Think about it. How many times did you experience a quiet moment, only for chaos to erupt seconds later? How many times did someone say, "I'm fine," only to explode later? How many times did things seem okay, only for the rug to be pulled out from under you? Your brain remembers all of that, and it learned a brutal lesson. Calm is just the mask chaos wears before it strikes. So now, when things are peaceful, when nothing is wrong, your nervous system doesn't relax. It tenses, because it's waiting, preparing, expecting. Psychologists call this anticipatory anxiety. It's when your brain treats peace as a warning sign instead of a safe space. And here's what's heartbreaking. Even when you're with people who love you, people who are safe, people who would never hurt you, your brain doesn't fully believe it. It's not that you don't trust them logically. It's that emotionally, your nervous system is still stuck in the past, still expecting betrayal, still bracing for impact. So you watch them, you analyze their words, you look for signs, and when they're too quiet, you think, what's wrong? When they're too happy, you think, this won't last. When they reassure you, you think, they're just saying that. You're not being difficult, you're not being ungrateful, you're just operating from a place where kindness once came with conditions, where love was unpredictable, where safety was always temporary, and until you heal that wound, calm will always feel like a lie. This is why vacations don't feel relaxing, why weekends don't feel restful, why even when you have nothing to do, you can't shake the feeling that you should be doing something. Because your brain has learned that stillness is dangerous. that letting your guard down is how you get hurt. So you fill your time, you stay busy, you keep moving, because movement feels safer than rest, action feels safer than peace, and exhaustion somehow feels safer than calm. Just the hypervigilance loop. Here's where it gets complicated, because hypervigilance doesn't just protect you, it also perpetuates itself. Let me explain. When you're constantly scanning for threats, you start to find them. Not because they're real, but because your brain is tuned to see danger everywhere. Someone doesn't text back right away, they're mad at you, someone sighs, you did something wrong, someone's tone shifts slightly, they're pulling away, your brain takes neutral data and interprets it as danger. Because that's what it's been trained to do. And here's the cruel part. When you act on that interpretation, when you withdraw, apologize, or over-explain, you often create the very outcome you feared. People sense your tension, they feel your distance, and they start to pull back not because they were upset before, but because your hypervigilance made the interaction uncomfortable. That's the loop. Your fear of rejection creates behavior that leads to rejection. Your anticipation of conflict creates tension that turns into conflict. And every time it happens, your brain says, "See? I was right to be vigilant." So the cycle continues, and you stay trapped in a pattern that feels like protection but is actually isolation. This is what psychologists call a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your belief creates the behavior. Your behavior creates the outcome, and the outcome reinforces the belief. And the worst part, you don't even realize you're doing it, because it all happens so fast. The scanning, the interpreting, the reacting. It's automatic, unconscious. By the time you're aware of it, the damage is already done. Someone once described hypervigilance as wearing glasses that only show you danger. Everything else gets filtered out. The kindness, the safety, the moments when nothing bad is happening. Your brain doesn't register those, it only sees threats. So you live in a world that feels more dangerous than it actually is. Not because the world is dangerous, but because your perception is skewed by a nervous system that's still fighting a war that ended years ago. What it feels like to live this way. If you've never experienced hypervigilance, it's hard to explain what it feels like. It's like carrying an invisible weight that no one else can see. You look fine, you smile, you function. But inside, you're running 1,000 calculations every second. It's like living in a house where every floorboard creaks. You tiptoe everywhere. You barely breathe. Because making noise feels dangerous. It's like being a translator in your own life. You don't just hear words, you decode them. What did they mean by that? Why did they say it that way? What are they not saying? And the exhausting part, you can't explain it to people who don't get it. They say things like, "Just relax," or "You're overthinking," or "Not everything is that deep." But to you, everything is that deep, because your survival once depended on reading between the lines, on catching the warning signs before they became disasters. So when people tell you to relax, it doesn't help. It just makes you feel more alone. Because they don't understand that for you, vigilance isn't a choice. It's the only way you know how to exist. You try to explain it sometimes. You say things like, "I just need to know what to expect," or "I don't like surprises," and people nod, but they don't really understand. Because they've never had to live in a body that treats every unexpected sound like a threat. They've never had to navigate relationships while constantly bracing for abandonment. They've never had to smile through a dinner party while their nervous system is screaming that something's wrong. And so, you stop trying to explain. You stop reaching out. You learn to live with it alone, because being misunderstood is sometimes more painful than being unseen. The hidden gifts. But here's something people don't talk about enough. Hypervigilance, for all its costs, also gave you something. It made you observant, perceptive, deeply attuned to the emotions of others. You can walk into a room and instantly sense the energy. You can tell when someone's lying. You can feel when something's off, even when everyone else is oblivious. That's not a small thing. That's emotional intelligence. That's intuition. That's a superpower that most people don't have. The problem is, you've been using it to protect yourself, to scan for danger, to avoid pain. But what if you could use it differently? What if, instead of scanning for threats, you could use that same awareness to notice beauty, to sense connection, to recognize love when it shows up? Because the truth is, Your hypervigilance didn't make you broken. It made you sensitive, and sensitivity, when it's not stuck in survival mode, is one of the most beautiful qualities a human can have. You notice things others miss. The way someone's voice softens when they talk about something they love. The way light changes throughout the day. The subtle shifts in energy that reveal what people are really feeling. You feel deeply. You care deeply. And yes, that means you hurt deeply too. But it also means you have a capacity for empathy that's rare in this world. So the goal isn't to get rid of your sensitivity. It's to redirect it. To teach your nervous system that not everything you notice is a threat. That sometimes what you're sensing is love, connection, safety. And that's possible. It takes time. It takes patience. But it's possible. The aftermath. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Hypervigilance doesn't just affect your present, it affects your future. Because when you spend years living in survival mode, you start to lose touch with who you are beneath the vigilance. You stop knowing what you actually want, because wanting things feels dangerous. Desire makes you vulnerable, so you learn to want nothing, to need nothing, to become so self-sufficient that you don't have to risk disappointment. You stop trusting your own instincts, because your hypervigilance has made you doubt everything. Is this feeling real? Or am I just overreacting? Are they actually upset, or am I reading into it? You lose the ability to experience joy fully, because even in happy moments there's a voice in the back of your mind whispering, "This won't last, don't get too comfortable, something bad is coming." And maybe the saddest part? You start to believe that this is just who you are, that you're naturally anxious, naturally tense, naturally difficult. But that's not true. You're not naturally this way. You were made this way, by circumstances you didn't choose, by environments you couldn't control, by people who should have made you feel safe but didn't, and that's not your fault. Your hypervigilance isn't a personality flaw, it's a survival adaptation. It's proof that you're resilient, not broken, that you found a way to survive when your environment was unpredictable. The problem is, that adaptation doesn't serve you anymore. What protected you as a child is now limiting you as an adult. And recognizing that is the first step toward change. Why healing feels impossible. If you're someone who lives with hypervigilance, you've probably tried to change. You've told yourself to stop overthinking, to trust people more, to relax, but it doesn't work. Because you can't logic your way out of a nervous system response. Hypervigilance isn't a thought problem, it's a body problem. Your brain has been wired through repeated experience to expect danger. And that wiring doesn't change just because you want it to. Think of it like this. If you touched a hot stove once, you'd be cautious around stoves. But if you touched a hot stove every day for years, your entire relationship with stoves would change. You wouldn't just be cautious. You'd be hypervigilant. You'd watch the stove even when it's off. You'd tense up just being in the same room. You'd assume every stove is hot until proven otherwise. That's what trauma does to the nervous system. It doesn't just teach you to avoid danger, it teaches you that danger is everywhere. And healing from that takes more than willpower. It takes rewiring. You need experiences that prove to your nervous system that safety is possible. Not just mentally, but physically. You need to feel it in your body. That's why traditional talk therapy, while helpful, isn't always enough for hypervigilance. Because you can understand why you're hypervigilant and still be hypervigilant. Understanding is the first step, but embodiment is where the real change happens. The body keeps the score. There's a reason why hypervigilance lives in the body, because trauma isn't just a memory, it's a physical imprint. When something threatening happens, your body responds, your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, your breathing shallows. That's your fight or flight response kicking in. In a healthy situation, once the threat passes, your nervous system returns to baseline. Your heart rate slows, your muscles relax. Your body signals to your brain, we're safe now. But when threats are constant or unpredictable, your body never gets that signal. It stays in a state of activation, and over time that becomes your new normal. So even years later, when the actual threats are gone, your body still carries that state of activation. It's like your nervous system got stuck in fight or flight and never learned how to turn off. That's why you can't just think your way out of hypervigilance, because the problem isn't in your thoughts. It's in your nervous system. Your body's still waiting for danger, still bracing, still preparing to fight or flee. And until you teach your body that it's safe, your mind will keep scanning for threats. This is what trauma therapists call somatic memory. The body remembers what the mind might have forgotten, and healing requires working with the body, not just the mind. That might mean breath work, or yoga, or somatic therapy, or anything that helps your nervous system learn to downregulate. To move out of fight or flight and into a state of rest and safety, it's not about forcing yourself to relax. It's about creating conditions where relaxation becomes possible. The path forward. So how do you heal from hypervigilance? The first step is understanding. And if you've made it this far, you've already taken that step, because once you understand that your hypervigilance is a survival response, not a personality flaw, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself. You stop thinking there's something wrong with you. Instead, you start to see yourself with compassion, as someone who adapted to survive, someone whose brain did the best it could with what it had. The second step is nervous system regulation. This is where the real work happens. Because you can't think your way out of hypervigilance. You have to teach your body that it's safe. That means practices like deep breathing, grounding exercises, somatic therapy, things that help your nervous system downregulate. That signal to your brain, there's no threat here, you can rest. It sounds simple, but for someone with hypervigilance, it's revolutionary. Because you're not just calming your mind, you're retraining your body's stress response. One of the most effective techniques is called grounding. It's when you use your senses to anchor yourself in the present moment. You might notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. This pulls your attention out of your head, where it's scanning for threats, and into your body, where you can feel that you're actually safe right now. It seems almost too simple, but hypervigilance lives in the future, in what might happen. Grounding brings you back to what is happening, which is usually nothing dangerous. The third step is building safe relationships, because hypervigilance often developed in relationships where safety was unpredictable. And it heals in relationships where safety is consistent. That means finding people who are patient, who don't punish you for your vigilance, who understand that trust takes time, and it means learning to communicate your needs. To say, I'm feeling on edge right now, it's not about you, I just need a moment. It's vulnerable, it's uncomfortable, but it's how you start to break the cycle. Because the only way to prove to your nervous system that connection can be safe is to experience safe connection, over and over, until your body starts to believe it. What safety actually feels like. Here's something that might surprise you. When you start to heal from hypervigilance, safety doesn't feel how you imagined. It doesn't feel like relief. It doesn't feel like calm. At first, it feels like nothing, because your nervous system is so used to high alert that when the alert finally drops, it's disorienting. You might feel numb, or bored, or like something's missing. That's normal. Your brain is recalibrating, it's learning a new baseline, and that takes time. Eventually, safety starts to feel different. It feels like spaciousness, like your thoughts aren't racing, like you can sit in a room without scanning for exits. It feels like being able to disagree with someone without fearing abandonment, like being able to rest without guilt, like being able to trust that when someone says they're fine, they actually are. It's not dramatic, it's quiet, almost boring, and that's how you know it's real. Because safety, real safety, isn't exciting. It's not full of adrenaline or intensity, it's just steady, predictable, soft. And for someone who's lived their whole life in survival mode, that kind of steadiness can feel like the most radical thing in the world. The compassionate truth. If you've lived with hypervigilance for years, you might be wondering, will I ever feel normal? And here's the honest answer. You might not feel normal in the way other people do, because your nervous system has been shaped by experiences most people can't imagine. But you can feel peace. You can feel safe. You can build a life where vigilance is a choice, not a reflex. It won't happen overnight. Healing never does. There will be setbacks. Days where you feel like you're back at square one, where the old patterns resurface and you think, I'll never get past this. But here's what I need you to know. Every time you choose to pause instead of react, every time you breathe instead of brace, every time you stay present instead of scanning, you're rewiring your brain. Slowly, gradually, but truly. Because healing isn't about erasing your past. It's about building a present where your past doesn't control you anymore. It's about learning that you can hold both truths at once. Yes, bad things happened, and yes, you're safe now. Yes, you were hurt, and yes, you can heal. Your hypervigilance doesn't define you. It's just one part of your story, a chapter that taught you how to survive. But survival isn't where your story ends, it's where it begins. Living beyond survival. There's a moment somewhere in the healing process where something shifts. You're sitting in a room, nothing bad is happening, and for the first time in a long time you're not scanning, you're not listening for footsteps, you're not reading tone, you're not preparing for disaster, you're just there. And it feels strange, almost wrong, because your entire identity has been built around vigilance. But slowly you start to realize something profound. You're still you, even without the hypervigilance, maybe even more you. Because the version of you that was always scanning wasn't your true self. It was your survival self. And now, finally, your true self has space to breathe. That's what healing looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of choice. The ability to notice your vigilance without being consumed by it, to feel the tension rise and say, I see you, you're trying to protect me, but I'm safe now. It's learning to thank your hypervigilance for keeping you alive while also setting it down when you don't need it anymore. Because you don't need it anymore, not the way you once did. The world is still unpredictable. People will still disappoint you sometimes. Things will still go wrong. But you're not that child anymore. You have resources now, support, self-awareness, the ability to choose how you respond, and that changes everything. The quiet revolution. Living with hypervigilance taught you something most people never learn: how to read the invisible, how to sense what others miss, how to protect yourself when no one else would. And those skills? They don't disappear when you heal. They just transform. You become someone who notices when others are struggling, who sees through masks, who offers safety to people who've never felt it. You become the person you needed when you were younger. That's the gift hidden inside hypervigilance. Not the vigilance itself, but the depth of awareness it gave you, the empathy, the understanding. You know what it's like to walk on eggshells, so you make sure others don't have to around you. You know what it's like to feel unsafe in calm rooms, so you create spaces where calm actually means peace. That's not weakness, that's wisdom earned through survival. And maybe that's the most beautiful paradox of all, that the very thing that isolated you for so long becomes the bridge that connects you to others. Because when you've healed enough to lower your own guard, you can help others lower theirs too. And maybe hypervigilance isn't something you'll ever fully leave behind. Maybe it's woven into who you are now, a permanent part of your story. But maybe that's okay. Because you're not defined by what was done to you. You're defined by how you choose to live with it, and choosing to heal, choosing to trust again, choosing to believe that not every room is a battlefield. That's the bravest thing you can do. So if you're reading this and you recognize yourself in every word, know this: you're not broken, you're not overreacting, you're not too much. You're someone whose nervous system learned to survive in a world that wasn't safe, and now you're learning to live in a world where safety is possible. That's not small. That's extraordinary. And maybe, just maybe, the day will come when you walk into a calm room and don't flinch, when silence feels like rest instead of warning, when peace feels like peace. And on that day, you'll finally understand you didn't need to stop being vigilant. You just needed to learn that you were worth protecting all along, not from the world, but from the fear that the world would never be safe enough. Because it is. It can be. And you deserve to experience that. You deserve to sit in stillness without your heart racing, to trust without waiting for betrayal, to love without scanning for exits. You deserve to finally rest. And when that moment comes, when you realize you've been sitting in a calm room for 5 minutes without once checking for danger, you'll know. You'll know that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to be afraid. It's about coming home to yourself. And that, more than anything, is worth the journey.